importantly, why we came about as a coalition, and then Kate will spend more time looking at the return on the state's investment, because we've been very fortunate and appreciative to have received state funding the last several years, last 4 years, and I think we have a shared responsibility to use tax dollars as responsibly as possible. We know that's really a central priority of yours, and that's one that we take seriously as well. So I'll start with our origin story. And at the very end of 2020, taking us back to those dark days of the pandemic, BYCC was really thinking about what are the ways in which public service, can be a strategy to address economic needs, to address environmental needs, as well as to bring people together. And we wanted to increase the number of paid service experiences for Vermonters. And we felt like if we brought different organizations together, there would be a strategy that could emerge out of that would be really helpful for Vermont. Vermont is a state that is program rich, but systems poor. We often have organizations and entities that are working in isolation. There's a siloing effect. And BYCC thought that there's an opportunity to try to create systems that would really meet Vermonters' needs, and particularly serve Vermonters who aren't traditionally represented or don't have needs met in a way that many others do. In a way of looking at that specific demographic profile is to offer a statistic. And Vermont has one of the highest graduation rates in the country, with approximately 92% high school graduation rate, and yet our college matriculation rate is about 53%. So what that means is essentially half of our population is graduating from not only graduating, but not going on to college. And yet, if you look at the economy, you know that continuing education training after high school is important for employers, and it's important for one's own career trajectory. And so Serve, Learn, Earn exists to address that need. What are the training opportunities to help Vermonters who aren't necessarily on a traditional continuing education path, and how can we make those training opportunities relevant, accessible, and really be an opportunity for someone to find a community of learners, a community of people who are interested in ongoing education as a way of connecting them from where they are now to their next employment opportunity. So Serve, Learn, Earn, that's why we came together. It's how we came together. We work in the sectors of the trades, green jobs, outdoor recreation, service industry, agriculture, and even education. And we are really proud of the work that we've done. We feel like we've been tremendously effective. We've learned from one another. We've shared resources. Oftentimes when you have partnerships between nonprofits, it feels a little bit like parallel play. I don't know if people are familiar with that child development phrase, but it's when you've got toddlers who just play alongside one another. We've moved past that parallel play to where we're actually integrating programs, and we're seeing our participants move from one program to another program, or more often than not, or moving from our programmatic experiences directly to employment. And so that feels great to have seen that evolution that our organizations have collaborated over the last several years. Who we serve, just some statistics here. So over the last 3 years, we have enrolled approximately 1,500 participants. And Kate will show a slide of where our projects are, but also where our participants from. And you'll see that we really are in all corners of Vermont, from the Northeast Kingdom down to Pownell, from Newport down to Brattleboro. Approximately this year, approximately 70% of our 600 participants are under the age of 24 years old. So that's that age group of helping young adults make that transition from adolescence to adulthood. Really Yeah, questions?
Yeah, so you just said that you had 1,500 participants, and then you said you had 600.
Right, so over the course of 3 years, 1,500 this past year, 600.
Got it.
Okay, yeah. Many are students, most are new to the workforce. Many are overcoming various barriers, poverty, addiction, justice involvement. There's a through line though, through all of, regardless of the individual and where they are, the through line is that our programs are cohort based. So you don't have an individual working in isolation, you have an individual who will work with a crew, with a group. And I think that's really an important programmatic element to highlight here, because in today's world, we're often seeing young adults who feel pretty isolated and don't have a strong sense of community. And so they can come into our organizations and really feel a sense of connection. An adage that I've really found resonant for me is that programs don't save lives, relationships do. And that's very much a philosophy that is one that drives our program design. So two final thoughts here. One, there was a recent 7 Days article, which we can share with you. Kate and I are going to be giving an overview and statistics and telling you what we do. That's distinct from sharing stories of our participants. In the 7 Days article, in the most recent 7 days, she really shares the story of a few participants who come into our programs and we've wrapped our arms around them, and it's really been transformative for them. So we'll make sure that we follow up and share that with you, and would encourage you to read it. I'm sure this is the time of year where you're getting lots to read. This would be the reading that would be like, oh, okay, that was fun to read. But let me introduce Kate here. So again, I'll go back to the early years of the Serve, Learn, Earn collaboration, and it was an initiative that was really held together by 4 executive directors. And we were getting a fair amount done, but we felt like we were just scratching the surface of what was possible. And so we reached out to private philanthropists who are supportive of our 4 organizations. And you can see our 4 organizations up there on the screen. And we asked them if they would help fund a position who would really oversee this collaboration and take it from the stage of parallel play to program interconnectedness, capturing data, increased fundraising, what have you. And Kate's been instrumental in leading that work. We have secured more and new private sources of philanthropy. One of the things to highlight here is that when we receive state funds, our goal is to have those funds be covering direct program expenses. So wages, stipends, transportation, uniform, tools, equipment, and not the administrative costs. So we've secured additional philanthropy so that the state funds are really going to Vermonters, if you will. We've also expanded the program's reach. And you can think about expansion and growth in a variety of different metrics. You can think about where we are, where we're offering our programs, the length of the programs that are now year-round, the number of participants, the types of programs that we're offering. That's all been the evolution of Serve, Learn, Earn over the last 2 years. And then finally, and Kate will speak to this a little bit more, we are really excited to be hiring a new position, again funded by private philanthropy, a data manager to capture data across our organizations so that we can really understand what it is that we're accomplishing, but what are also shortcomings? Where are we falling short? We believe that what you don't measure, you can't improve, and be able to have capacity to really look at and assess the ROI on the state's investment feels like a responsible path forward. So yesterday we were in House of Commerce. I spoke and then Kate spoke and then there was questions. Should we do that today?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Want to come up?
Yep.
Okay.
As Greg said, my name is Kate Blackman. I'm the director of Serve, Learn, Earn. Thank you so much for having us. I live in the borderlands of North Dakota. So I'm glad to be down south with you today, a little less snow down here.
So much warmer, probably too.
It's so much warmer, yeah, tropical almost, we would say, yeah, for sure. So like Rex said, we offer a continuum of programming across Serve Learner and between our 4 partners. And I have this slide here, I'm not gonna go through each program with you, but what I do want you to understand is that it's a unique structure for a workforce development organization to have both youth, young adult and adult programming, and we feel there's a lot of benefit to that structure. I want to highlight just a few programs that are applicable to your work here in this committee around natural resources and clean energy. So I've picked a few to highlight. So our partners at Audubon have a junior conservation tech program for high school age students. So this is really representative of what our high school programming looks like. This is a couple month-long program where they learn all about and are exposed to careers in conservation. So that might be the work of a forester, a biologist, a land manager. They have a sugar bush management program that they get exposed to as well, right? Some heritage jobs here in Vermont. Their service is in Huntington, working on the public trail system that Audubon has, maintaining that for access. This is a wonderful program for students who are like, I love being outside, but don't know what that means in terms of a career. Oftentimes this program can lead to what we call an early professional experience. And this is think of this as a really great first job for someone, meaning that you're learning not only about the career, but you're also learning about how to be a professional. Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, the organization Brett represents, has 2 programs. The farm program, which is where young people grow organic vegetables, and it's distributed to low-income Vermonters through the largest healthcare share in Vermont. So that means that healthcare providers are connecting their patients with free food. 70,000 pounds of produce were produced last year through that program. The conservation program at BYCC takes young people in small crews. They learn how to build trails, they learn forestry techniques, they learn outdoor infrastructure building techniques, which you can see here in the picture. They remove invasive species from Lake Champlain, and they're building their career credentials. So a credential of value is something that an employer would look at and say, okay, I understand the skills that you have. It allows for greater career advancement and getting your foot in the door. So OSHA 10 is a construction safety credential. GEMA logging is a chainsaw safety credential. Wilderness first aid is, if you understand what that is. This is a picture though of a BYCC crew working to replace the roof of a lean-to at a state park. So part of how Serve Learner works is in partnership with Forest Parks and Recreation. That is where our grant is facilitated and our public funding. That might seem strange to you to have FPR administering a workforce development grant, but we have seen and had a tremendous partnership with them and really feel like it's the perfect place for us, because not only do our trainees get to work with experts in the fields that we're training in, but also FPR is one of the largest landholders and landlords in the state. And there's a lot of infrastructure for us to train on and improve for the public. And so that is sort of the double bottom line of Serve Learner, is that we train folks and then the project or the outcome of our project as well. Lastly, we have programs that fall under more traditional workforce development programs that you might think of. 2 programs that are very similar that I'll talk in unison about is Resources 101 intensive trainings and Vermont Works for Women Trailblazers trainings. These are 6 or 7 week programs. The first 4 weeks spent learning, building skills, earning credentials. The last 2 weeks spent with an employer on the job, learning in what that employer is doing. oftentimes that experience leads to a job offer. So these credentials and experience that they're earning really is the gateway for them to land that job. You can see these different credentials. So EPA 608 credential is what you need to be able to install heat pumps. So that's a program that we actually partner with Vermont Adult Learning on. They have an Energy Works program, 2-week program, where you get trained to install heat pumps. You can see here a picture of our first ever heavy equipment training that Resource put on this past year. It is at VYCC's campus, so this is another way that our partners are collaborating. Resource needed to move some dirt around. VYCC has lots of dirt. It works really well together. These are just some basic metrics that I wanted to share across our the last 3 years. So the darkest blue line here is the year that we're currently in, and so these are our projections. We're reporting to FPR this month. We're well on our way to meeting these projections, but you can see the impact of state funding has been consistent growth across many metrics of our programs, including the number of participants that we're serving, the length of programs we're able to offer, the credentials of value is exponential growth, and then on the far left is the level of public funding that we got. So this is a map of where last year our participants lived. So you can see that we really are all across the state. Some of these outcomes we've already talked about. You can see here that since we started receiving public funding, 3.25 million of that has gone back to Vermonters' pockets in wages and stipends. We're really serious about creating super accessible programming, and we do that through having it be paid and also offering programs across the state. There's 3 positive outcomes that we look to reach in our programs. The first is, if someone enters a job right from our program, that's one outcome. If they're continuing in education or training, or if they're continuing in some form of service. And so you can see here, of the trainees that were looking to enter the workplace after our programs, 62% landed that job. That's a good rate for folks who have many hurdles to employment coming into programs. This is a map of our projects that we completed last year. So again, you can see that we're working in communities across the state. We have 7 different sort of buckets of projects that we do. I want to highlight just a couple that are applicable to your work here. Habitat assessment. This is training, excuse me, that our colleagues at Audubon really focus on. So they have those high school programs, but also internships and AmeriCorps positions that really work on building the skills of assessing land for management and conservation purposes. So these folks are training and interested in perhaps becoming a forester. Habitat improvement, this is what VYCC does in terms of their forestry project, in terms of their trail projects. Really so much good work happening with public land, as well as large private landowners. Trail and outdoor recreation projects, also VYCC and Audubon doing a lot of work there. And then lastly, a big bucket of our service projects have been around flood recovery in the last 2 years, as you can imagine. So we've really made a focus of flood recovery projects in the Barre area because our partners at Resource have both a facility there, and many of our participants in the area were personally impacted by the floods in Barre. And so that includes mucking out, it includes rebuilding projects, our construction trades programs doing a lot of training and work there, but it also is about like land restoration and stream bank strengthening. So some of the more land-based recovery as well. My last slide here, I just want you to know our full budget of programming is over $10 million a year right now. Our public funding is right around 2 million for the last couple of years. We're again asking the legislature for funds, a level ask from our ask last year of 2.5 million. Again, we really want to stay with Forest Parks and Recreation in their base budget for this funding. But like Brett said, we also are aggressively pursuing private philanthropy and federal funds. We're excited to be working really closely with the Department of Labor on a number of fronts. And we're pursuing the work initiative funding opportunity, which is workforce opportunity for rural communities. This is in partnership with the Northern Borders Regional Commission, which is such a critical partner for us because oftentimes Vermont can't compete federally for funding because of our small population size. And so this really highlights the needs of rural areas and aligns perfectly with the careers that we're training folks for in Vermont. I want to stop and see if there's any questions that I can answer or Brett can answer as well.
You're good.
I'm sorry, Jerry Williams, and just curious about, a lot of the stuff you're talking about is, like CTE education. And is there any way that, you're operating on a kind of a parallel with some of the things they're doing?
Yeah.
Any way that we could combine what they do through the Agency of Education?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. We do often partner a lot with CTs in terms of recruiting students for summer-based opportunities, so an extension of what they're training for. The other exciting thing that we're doing is that for our high school age programs, we're working through the flexible pathways legislation to be able to offer high school credit for some of our programs. Oftentimes those students are coming through CT and they have those basic entry level skills in the trades that make them excellent candidates for the workforce. And so often they don't need our programs. So many of the young people are people who maybe didn't access CTE, are regretting that now and sort of seeking those skills afterwards. The thing that we also know is that CTE is not producing enough students to meet the needs that we have. So we really need to work in tandem with them, and we do. The other exciting thing too with that, thinking about that same age group, is that some of our programs are also working with higher ed institutions to get college credit for this through the dual enrollment legislation. And so we really, like the flexible pathways and dual enrollment has really opened up our ability as nonprofit organizations to partner with AOE, to partner with high schools, and make this a real impactful learning experience for students.
I used to live right down the road from the Red Barn.
Oh, great.
Bloomsville.
Oh, yeah, well, we're restoring the second barn now.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great project.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I just wanna, thanks for that question, because that was similar to my question. Our CTE centers actually are very under enrolled, so if you're pulling students out of the CTE centers, that is challenging their viability.
Oh, we're not pulling them out. No, because most of the programs that we have for high school age students are happening in the summer.
Okay.
Or in that like Audubon's junior conservation type program is in the after school space as well. So no, we wouldn't pull students out. We actually, our colleagues at Vermont Works for Women work specifically with CTs to get more students in there. We would like to see more students in there. And we actually feel like our programs might give them the little bit of taste of what it could be to be pursuing a career. And we would always encourage students to then pursue that through their CT. So we're not in competition at all with them.
And are you working with CCB and the state colleges to partner with their programs as well?
Yeah, so across the collaboration, we're doing that. I can speak for BYCC, so we have a partnership with CCB where all of our crew leaders who come to BYCC get 12 credits And we're seeing some of our leaders then matriculate to CCV, because they've already earned a semester with their credit. The New England Board of Higher Education was instrumental in setting up that and funding that partnership. We've also worked with, Vermont State University to offer different types of field-based experiences. Most recently, our forestry cruise was set up in partnership with Vermont Tech.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've learned recently too, in talking with CT instructors, is that there's also quite a difficult, they have difficulty in placing students in a work-based learning because of issues of insurance and, their employers don't want to take on that risk. The benefit of our programs is that we're used to taking on that risk. So someone who comes in as on a forestry crew at BYCC during the summer may actually get to handle a chainsaw, do activities that an employer would never let them do. And we value safety, and that's of utmost importance, but we cover that kind of insurance and risk all the time. And so working in partnership with the CTs, it just expands opportunities for students in the state.
Okay, yeah, I just wanna make sure that you're not pulling students out of our public
We
institutions
would
in order to.
like every student to be in a CT. That would be our goal. Yeah.
Question?
No.
Oh.
I remember from last year, you were on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll just leave you, we just have some brochures that have some additional information on it, and I just wanna really thank you for your time, and yeah, we look forward to, if you have any other questions or comments, we would look forward to hearing it.
One other question for you. I mean, it does seem like you all are growing. Are you feeling like you have more capacity? Or are you sort of like at capacity right now? I mean, you're asking for like level. But, yeah, what is your capacity trajectory?
Yeah, so typically our programs are fully enrolled if not over enrolled.
Yeah.
And so we, I think we wanna be smart in terms of our expansion, and one way that we have expanded is by, this past year, we piloted it in partnership with the Northwood Stewardship Center. And so when we think about expansion, we think about it in many different ways. New partners might be part of that work, but then also really thinking about where is the need in Vermont and can we get there? And so we're still growing, but public funding has been wonderful. It is also something we come and fight for every year. And so the more that we can become into the base budget of FPR, I think the more that we'll feel optimistic about taking that bigger leap.
Got you.
Yes.
Number one, this program started soon, and really appreciate it when you're doing it. I did know that you are later established for in presence, and so what are some of the obstacles that you're facing there, or what are some of the difficulties of getting into those 4 southern counties?
Yeah, so we have sort of 2 ways that we move around the state. Our partners at Vermont Works for a Minute and Resource literally move their programs to new areas of the state. And so having partnerships on the ground in those communities is critical, from helping to recruit local folks, to building service projects, to just having a space where we can train people. So sometimes breaking into areas is more difficult than in other areas. So if you have partners in for instance, your community, share those, and we really need someone on the ground to be able to work in communities. The second way is that, like the Vermont Youth Conservation Board, is that we train folks here in Richmond and then we send them out across the state for projects in project-based learning. And so that's really about establishing partners in all parts of the state who can work with us and not have projects that afford the training that we want and are at the right skill level, and they understand that working with a crew who's training is different than working with a professional crew. So again, it's really about partnerships, and that's actually been a really a bonus of working in a collaborative is that we have different sets of partnerships and we rely on each other to learn more. So we're always interested in moving into different parts of the state. And you know, we recognize where we're light in certain areas and are looking for growth there, but I appreciate that.
Yes, go ahead.
Another gem we've got is Martha Job. Sure.
Yes.
Over in Virginia, you partner with them at all?
You know what, we haven't partnered with them in the past, I just toured their facility for the first time, doing excellent work. And one of the ways I think that we could partner with them is that they, you know, they have a continuum of programming just like we do, and there might be ways to recruit students out of theirs who need a more advanced training. And so, yeah, that I think they're awesome, so we haven't done a lot of work, but they, you know what's great about them too, is that they're bringing a lot of young people to Vermont. And I think one of the things that we're always thinking about, because AmeriCorps and UICC bring a lot of people to Vermont as well, is that how can we get them to stay, how can we make that a really easy transition? Housing is the biggest.
I think it's funded in a different way too.
They're funded, they're a federal, they're a federal program,
Yep, sure, go ahead.
So I recall last year, I think in the House Natural Resources Committee, you actually asked us to form a recommendation.
We asked to be included in your budget letter. Yes,
Is that a question we can hear?
we would love that, yes, absolutely.
Thank you for inviting that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Request.
I remember from last year, so.
Everybody wants to be.
Yeah. I understand. I understand. Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So one of the concerns I always have is northern borders, different funding, are we all competing for the same money? Sometimes that if we had, you know, the state and your organization, nonprofits, how can we kind of merge that? I was aware you were there, but I never got the details.
Yeah, one of the things we are so excited about this year is the hiring of Sabina Haskell to run the state workforce development board. We really feel like her office or position is going to help us have more sight into what everyone is doing, what kind of funding, how can we collaborate? Ronnie Baston from Vermont Works for Women sits on that board, so we're at that table, we're excited to participate, and we hope that from that sort of reorganization in terms of workforce development, we're gonna see a lot more alignment.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Interesting.
Well, and
Well, it's not just our committee either, it's statewide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we also see that in the philanthropic circle, so we also see a lot of nonprofits competing for,
Right,
that. And one of the things that was, an impetus for us pulling together was to find synergies so that we're not competing, but, there's more collaboration. I mean, there's a term that a former colleague of mine termed collaboration.
Sure.
It's always gonna be a little collaboration here, but we want it to be more collab than to tissue. That makes sense.
Yeah.
well, thank you for all the work that you're doing, because we know that one of the bottlenecks towards climate work particularly is workforce.
Yeah.
And so you're helping to fill that gap, and so I'm being very encouraged by your work. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah. And so, great, and so we also have Shayna Weaver. Okay, from the Vermont Electric Power Company. So a little bit of a gear shift, but thank you for coming in and introducing yourself and Vermont Electric Power Company. And yeah, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so
Yes.
very much for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm gonna share the screen here. Let's see. Here, 1 second. Okay. Well,
Again, good morning. My name is Shayna Loisel. I work for Vermont Electric Power Company. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm glad to be here today to give an introduction both to myself and to Velco. I plan on giving a high-level overview, a little bit about who we are, what we do, what sets us apart from the other utilities, both in the state and region. And then a little bit about some of the work we have underway here in Vermont. I see some new faces in the committee, so by way of introduction, a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Raleigh County. I still live there with my family, my partner and my 6-year-old daughter, and have been with Vermont Electric Power Company, or Velco, for the past going on 16 years this year. So I've served in a variety of communication roles there, and I feel pretty lucky to have had this front row seat to watching the beginning of grid transformation and clean energy transition. There's been a lot of work that's happened for the past 15, 16 years. So I bring a wealth of knowledge today, and I'm going to try again to keep it high level. And if there's any questions that you have, feel free to interrupt me, and I can pause anywhere that you have interest. A little bit about Velco. So we are Rutland based. We're about 180 employees and growing. Fun fact, a third of our workforce has retired in the past 5 to 6 years. So when I walk into the office now, it's a lot of new faces, young faces, which is really exciting to see here in Vermont. So we have an evolving grid, and that requires an evolving workforce. Very nice setup from your last witness. So Velco, as a statewide transmission utility, we are the grid operator, and we're seeing new emerging standards, grid reliability standards that we have to follow, new state policy that we need to implement into our planning and thinking, and then grid behavior. Yeah, the grid does not look the way it did 15 years ago, and it doesn't behave the same way that it did. And so it's a much more dynamic system that really requires us, requires us to think outside the box and find innovative solutions to make these changes. So a statewide transmission utility. Our background is we were established in 1956 really to build one transmission line to bring hydropower from the St. Lawrence to Vermont. And from there, we grew from there. Our ownership structure is pretty unique. We are transmission only, and that means we only deliver the high voltage electric power. We do not have any retail customers or commercial business customers. Our ownership structure is unique in that we are actually owned by the 17 distribution utilities that do provide electric service to Vermont, as well as a public benefits corporation. That's the Vermont Low Income Trust for Electricity, or VLIT. And so this unique governance structure really allows Velco to pass, because we are a for-profit company, but we're set up in a way that allows for it to be cooperative benefits to all of the distribution utilities in the state. And so that allows us to pass real value to Vermonters and Vermont ratepayers. So how that works. Velco's earnings that we make that are above our expenses is actually required to go back to the distribution utilities. And they in turn are required to use that revenue to reduce their revenue requirements for Vermont ratepayers. And so that helps reduce electric bills. And because of that financial model, anytime that Velco can do good work beyond just keeping the grid reliable, and we're able to create additional value through our tariffs and our financial streams, that value essentially is going back to every grid connected customer on the grid. So that's a very unique situation for Vermont. There are many other transmission owners in New England, I and across the country, I only know of one other that has a similar construct of passing that value back to ratepayers.
Does that prevent you from building reserves,
Building reserves in terms of,
having money for more than emergencies, but for the future and building out, to keep you from building reserves?
it does not keep us from building reserves. Well, let me put it this way, we're not building reserve, we build when the need is sought after. So I guess in a way it does, we're not building past what we need. Velco, we are a very technical company where we have engineers that are planning the system, they're performing multiple studies to make sure that the capacity of our system can meet the growing demand over the next 10 and 20 years, and I'll get into a little bit about that here. But certainly not just building projects to meet.
Well, I meant building the financial capacity to have money there to start the next round of need.
I see. So the way that the financial construct works is we are part of a regional system, and that connects us to the New England grid, both in a manner of electrons and also by the wallet. And so it's a regional grid. Vermont is part of the 6 states. And how the tariffs work is Velco has to pay for 4% of our projects that benefit the region. And the rest of New England pays the other 96% for Vermont-based projects. Now, that's also on the flip side, when there are reliability projects that benefit Vermont, that might be in Massachusetts, Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, we also have to pay that percent. So a bit about our managed assets, statewide company, so a lot of miles of transmission line to maintain. We have about 14,000 acres of managed rights of way with all different kinds of habitat that, you know, we have a dedicated environmental team that works really hard to ensure thriving habitat that is compatible with grid reliability. We also have, even though we are a transmission company, we also have a 1,600-mile fiber optic network. It's, you know, double the amount of transmission lines we actually have. This really enables us to have that real-time communication with our facilities that are scattered across the state. And then more importantly, we're actually involved in a project right now where we're adding an additional 800 miles of fiber optic, and we're going past just the high voltage transmission system, and now we're going down deeper into the grid, connecting to distributed energy resources, because that is the evolving way. We're no longer a kind of linear straight to the large generator. It's multiple generators, and we need to have a better understanding of how those distributed energy resources can behave, and fiber allows us to give that data back to our grid operators to help them make better informed decisions on how to operate the grid.
Yes. So is that fiber just exclusively used by you, or is it connected to the larger fiber network in the state for also use by businesses and individuals?
It is a private network that's owned and operated and maintained by Velco. We do have partnerships collaborations where we've allowed some co-location with some of the broadband providers. So we are essentially the backbone, both from a transmission perspective, but also from the fiber optic perspective. So we can serve as strong middle mile for the other commercial broadband utilities that would then use our fiber optic network to get to a place and then build out their own fiber.
Okay, so are you working with the CUDs and the Vermont Community Broadband Board?
Yes, in fact, our vice president and chief technology officer is on that board.
Oh, great.
And back when the CUDs were created, I think we may have been one of the first people to say, hey, let's all get together and talk about the needs and where we can help. So, I mean, they are now obviously very deep into their work and their various communities, but certainly our door is open for anybody that's looking for a way to collaborate. If there's a way we can help, we take a look at how we can do that.
Right.
And then I like to point out, it's from a financial perspective, you know, we are in more than 172 communities across the state from that middle mile fiber. But we're also in 193 Vermont towns, and we're one of the largest property tax payers in Vermont. 2024 was just shy of $31 million in property taxes. I put this slide in here just in terms of the differentiating between Velco and the distribution utilities. I use the analogy of the highway system. Considering Velco as the superhighway, that's those black lines throughout this franchise map. And we're delivering high voltage power to substations, which is being stepped down to a lower kilovolt, provided to distribution utilities like Burlington Electric Department, Green Mountain Power, the co-ops, all the municipals. They're taking that power and putting it on their own system, the distribution utility system. So if you saw that I had another layer that showed the distribution utility system on this map, it just looked like full map spaghetti lines, because they probably have triple the amount of lines that we have as they're going to every home business. And this just shows kind of the makeup of how the utilities are serving the state. Obviously, Green Mountain Power is one of the largest utilities, so that's the green color. Vermont Electric Cooperative towards the north in that reddish color. And I think it's also important here to, as I said, we are connected to the regional grid. So these lines, even though they stop at the Vermont border, are essentially connected to our neighbors. And interconnection, when we talk about reliability, it's a really important thing when I meet with our planners and planning for the next 10, 20 years. It's interconnection is always a hot topic of how can we make robust interconnection so that we have a strong grid. Velco's transmission system, we are importing most of the time into the state. And that's been pretty much the way for the past 10, 12 years. However, in the past 2 years, we've actually, with all the distributed energy resources that have come online, particularly solar PV, has had a really meaningful impact on, for the first time since Vermont Yankee closed, we're actually exporting power, very minimal amounts, and very small amounts part of the day, but it's happening more frequently, and that's a good behavior that we haven't seen in a long time. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
So what's your connection with ISO New England?
Yeah, ISO New England is our bulk electric system provider. So we're essentially taking direction from them for when they need our lines to close or act in a different way. So our grid operators are in constant communication with the ISO New England grid operators. So as I said, Velco serves several different roles within the state and the region, but they're all guided by our vision to create a sustainable Vermont. We do that through our operating model of being a for-profit company, but with cooperative benefits for the state of Vermont. But beyond our main role of ensuring reliability through the planning, constructing, maintaining the high voltage transmission system, Velco also serves as the local control center for Vermont's grid operations. That's our grid operators are running the grid. It's 24/7, 365 days out of the year. They're monitoring and responding to changes on the grid at all hours of the day. We also serve as Vermont's metering and power contract settlement agent. Really, that's our power accounting team is taking the daily metering from the state of Vermont, they're aggregating that, and then they're submitting it to ISO New England for the entire state. We also have a strong voice at the region, making sure that Vermont's interests, particularly affordability, is being kept in the front of all of the grid operators' minds. There are, as I said, we pay 4% of all the projects outside of Vermont. And Vermont, you know, we're a hardy, frugal state, and we like to bring those values to our neighbors throughout New England as well. And then just a moment on these last two items. So Velco's core work is making sure that the grid stays reliable. And one of the ways we do that is through our long-range transmission planning efforts and the process that takes place. It's a 3-year process. Every 3 years, Velco's required to produce a long-range transmission plan that looks out on the 20-year horizon and identifies any reliability deficiencies that might be driven by load growth in the state. We just produced our 2024 long-range transmission plan. I brought a few for you, for anybody who wants some light Wednesday night reading. It really is a great primer if you're new to the energy arena, and it's a very comprehensive document that provides a lot of great insight. That plan basically is created to begin a discussion with Vermont stakeholders on what the best way to what would be the best solutions to meet those reliability needs. And we are required to not just produce transmission solutions. We're actually required by the Public Utility Commission to look at non-transmission alternatives. So that might look like energy battery storage, that could look like distributed generation, flexible load management programs. We know the grid is evolving. We know load growth will be significantly increasing over the next 10 to 20 years as we electrify our grid. And so these are things we're taking into account as we make this plan. That plan is actually vetted through the Vermont System Planning Committee, and I'll get to another slide about what the VSPC does. But this is a statewide grid stakeholder group that addresses grid reliability issues and is shepherding that non-transmission alternative process. And Velco manages that role. This I affectionately refer to as our frying pan slide. This is just to show you how Velco is regulated. So we are federally regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They are really the interstate transmission regulator. Then the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, they're the ones that really develop and enforce standards of how transmission operators have to run their grid and plan for their grid. There's a regional entity, the Northeast Power Coordinating Council, and then ISO New England is taking direction from them. And then you have the state of Vermont. Even though we're federally regulated, we are required, particularly around siting, regulated by the Public Utility Commission and the Department of Public Service here in Vermont. So this is just an introduction to the Vermont System Planning Committee. As I said, it's a collaborative process. It was established in 2007 to address reliability planning. It was really an outgrowth of a Velco project that did not go over well because there wasn't enough planning ahead of time to look at alternatives. And by the time the analysis was done, we really needed to build that transmission line then, like yesterday. That was the Northwest Reliability Project, that went from our West Rutland substation all the way up to our Queen City substation. So that's a big 50+ mile transmission line. The first that Vermont had seen since the 60s likely. It was all driven by NERC reliability standards. There was the 2003 blackout that happened. You might remember that. Vermont actually fared well because we essentially disconnected from our inner tie to New York and we were able to keep our lights on. Unfortunately, the rest of the Atlantic seaboard was not so lucky, and that was a pretty horrific event. You know, there were a few fatalities. There was an outage for multiple days. But the fallout of that blackout essentially had the federal regulators say, what do we need to do to prevent this from happening again? And that put in very stringent planning standards of how transmission owners had to have more redundant grids. And by redundant, I mean, if one line has a fault, there better be a second line that can pick it back up, especially if you're connected to a full region. That precipitated our Northwest Reliability Project, but as I said, it was the first type of construction project we had done in a very long time. And that hence led to the Public Utility Commission opening an investigation on what could be a better process to ensure that full, fair, and timely consideration were given to non-traditional alternatives. Could Belco and the Vermont utilities looked at energy efficiency, distributed generation? At the time, that wasn't a significant thing in our state. And so with that happening, the VSPC has been around for, what's that, 16 years? Sorry, since 2007. Having a hard time doing my math there, but it's really become a place where, of course, we haven't had a lot of load growth over the past 10 years, but we are seeing it now. And it really is a place where engineers and policymakers are coming together and really having those hard conversations about how we are going to meet our future needs with this evolving grid. So, as I said, we have produced the 2024 Vermont Long Range Transmission Plan. A few key takeaways from this plan. Vermont will continue to depend on transmission. Our peak load hour now is after dark because of that impact that solar PV has had on our system. We're now our peak hour, which is what Belco is required to meet and required to plan for, is now after 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, sometimes in the summer. It changes depending on what time of year. And so Belco is importing to serve the load at that point. 2 data points, as I said before, the majority of time Vermont is importing our power. And I shared that last spring was the first time for multiple times we were actually exporting to other states. In our long range transmission planning analysis, we produced 2 scenarios. A high load forecast, which we called our Vermont roadmap. That was essentially if we were going to meet our Vermont state policy goals for thermal and transportation, electrification of the thermal and transportation sectors. We were going to see an X amount of load growth in Vermont. And then we also did a second scenario where if we don't meet those policy needs and we keep going at the same rate that we are now, to give us kind of a range of what we need to be prepared for. But at the end of the day, we do have to be prepared for what that high load could be. And so the long range transmission plan forecast is really projecting a doubling of loads by 2040. And so we are taking measures to make sure that our grid, which currently is about 1,000 megawatt capacity grid, make sure that it is ready for when we are doubling our load in Vermont. Right now, the load in Vermont, it's on a very high load day, it might be around 800 megawatts. But here in the control center, it doesn't look like 800 megawatts because of all the distributed energy resources. It's essentially bringing it down, what we see around 100, 200, 300 kilowatts. But we also have to know that that renewable energy is intermittent and be prepared for those reserves when the sun isn't shining or the wind is blowing type of situation. One of the main takeaways from this plan, which we spoke a lot about in the last session and the previous session, was about the distributed generation growth in Vermont. And with the renewable energy standard being modified last year to doubling in-state renewables, we wanted to make sure that the takeaway of location really matters when it comes to distributed generation, where it's sited. Our plan essentially says that if distributed generation continues to be sited in the same historical patterns that we've seen over the last 15 years, then we know it's going to exceed the transmission capacity. There are places where we can host more in-state generation, and there are places that essentially reach their transmission capacity on the system. We're actually working on an interactive map right now that will be on our website here in the next few months that allows developers to better understand how their projects may or may not impact the transmission system. It's referred to as the points of interconnection heat map. So you can go there, you can put in your location, you can put in the megawatts that you'd like to put onto the grid, and it is essentially an innovative tool to showcase what type of deficiencies that might produce if that project were to be sited in that location. So really excited to bring that online to Vermont stakeholders. We've also said that more collaboration and innovation will be needed to achieve Vermont's renewable goals.
I hate to interrupt, but just help me, what we were just talking about a minute ago.
Yeah.
Are you, as you're doing your planning, is the planning moving toward helping the state put renewables in a place where you're gonna be like set them on the grid now, or are you planning to build the capacity to take more renewables? Which of those? It sounds like you're headed toward trying to get renewables to be located in places where it actually makes some sense in terms of grid status. Is that accurate?
Correct, that's correct. And the reason for that is driven from a sustainability, reliability, and affordability stance.
Good.
If generation is sited in an area where the transmission capacity has been exceeded, that will require an upgrade. And when it's generation based, it has to be paid for by Vermont solely. And essentially, if it's too expensive, it doesn't get built, and then that produces additional constraints on the system, which we've seen in Vermont, and particularly in the northern section of Vermont, transmission constraints because of so much distributed energy, distributed generation that has been sited in the northern section of Vermont.
To follow up on that, are you finding that the places where there's you're either close to the boundary, that constraint of exceeding transmission, or where you're at that point, are those places where one assumption is that it's places where the transmission lines themselves are at a lower capacity. Another assumption is that it's some place where there's a well, I guess maybe I'll just leave it open. Is there a trend in the kinds of places where you see that they're either at or close to capacity?
It's predominantly in places where there's a lot of land that's cheap.
Okay.
Because that's where development can take place, and closer probably to the larger load centers as well. And so that's when you look at that map, and I actually brought the plan with me, so there's an image there. I should have included it here to kind of showcase that heat map of the red zone means we're reaching capacity, and if it goes above, we'll have to look at additional upgrades.
Just as a follow-up, I'm wondering if you could send us a link to that, because I would very much,
That heat map?
yeah, I would love
Yeah.
to, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
great.
So.
Yeah, go ahead.
Follow up again, to make sure I had my arms around this. So what is happening, or the potential is to happen, is to have a lot of renewable built in rural areas where you really can't do anything with it, or there's not capacity, is what you're saying is that the closer it's built to growth centers, let's say,
Yeah,
the better.
absolutely.
So, having it built on or near the currently built environment, putting aside the different. Keeping that in some ways is actually more desirable than having it in rural areas.
Well, when you look at the map, and I'm gonna take it out here just to give you a sense, right here. I'll hand this to you. Sorry for those that aren't, don't have that readily available, but certainly I can hand these out.
Great, thank you.
And could you just tell me what page I'm
66.
66. Will show you, and this is obviously a very static image. Oh, and here's an additional one for.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize your comments perfectly.
This is your fun Wednesday reading.
This is quite heavy.
It's a very complicated document. Every 3 years, it becomes a little bit more complex. This is the biggest one yet. So to answer your question, looking at that static map, showing it essentially is a heat map and showing you from a color coded manner where capacity is almost filled. And as you look more towards the southern sections of Vermont, Rutland, Windsor, Bennington, there are those lighter colors where there is more grid capacity. That also happens to be where we have two giant pipes of 345,000 kilovolt transmission lines that once connected to Vermont Yankee, but now obviously surpasses that and continues on to Massachusetts. So that's there is a reason why there is more capacity there. And the transmission lines in the northern section of Vermont certainly aren't as big.
Yeah, go ahead, I have so many questions too.
How did this happen? Why is there, how did the build out work in a way that led to the Northeast Kingdom being so, or area, being so close to capacity?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think it was really the state stepped up, this house stepped up and knew that we had to make changes to find a way to decarbonize and put more renewable generation on the grid. And with those policy measures that were in place, there was a response to it. And
Why there?
well, again, I think it's there because that is a place where there is a lot of land for siting.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where there's wind, that's the wind is up there,
Yeah.
and so it was built because it was cheap and available.
Okay.
Yeah, same reason why we have the state run done.
Yeah.
I just, that's time check, because I know I've been 1 minute.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Great, I'm happy to close up here, I also had, I think it's just 2 more slides to talk about just our current work underway, if you're sure.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Excellent. All right, so current priorities, we know that there will be costs associated to meet the needs of the evolving grid, both from a local and a regional perspective. And we're not alone in this work, we expect to see those increased regional costs as well, which is why our team and kind of Team Vermont is really focused on how we can get the most out of the system that we have. And to be able to mitigate some of those costs, rather than just building more transmission, what can we do with the assets that we have right now? How can they be optimized? We're doing that through a few different ways. One of them is a new term in the world, grid enhancing technologies. And we are very curious about how those are going to impact the transmission system. We're watching how other transmission owners across the country are implementing things called dynamic line ratings that are measuring what a line is actually the capacity, the heat, the temperature level, when it's really hot out and the line is, or when there's a lot of load on a line, it's really heated. To be able to know what that temperature is allows us to maybe fluctuate where load can be increased or we shouldn't put any more on. There are other grid enhancing technologies. One that we are actually involved with in getting cited is it's a digital control device that we're citing in the northwest section of Vermont. Because ISO New England, when they do their regional studies, they have identified Northwest Vermont as a area with deficiencies. And so we are partnering with EPRI on a proposal to install this device, and it's going to enable us to access, traffic wind in upstate, but also allow us to let in more power when we want, and then to say no thank you when we're already at capacity. This is a very rudimentary way, but our very own stoplight for
Early 60s.
yes, no.
Love that.
As I
Very polite technology.
exactly. As I said before, we are deploying more fiber to provide more visibility into the grid and enable our planners and grid operators to work more effectively. And then lastly, just new transmission. We are a transmission company. We're more than that, and we're required to look at things that are not transmission, and we've done that for a long time. But I do think it's important to recognize where we are in the world, and with electrification, smart electrification happening, transmission can be our friend, and it can certainly help promote more renewable generation, bringing that to load centers. And so Belk is actually in the midst of a project right now. It is our Franklin County Line Upgrade Project. And the reason why this project is important is rather than just building rebuilding this line, it's a very aged line, and I'll just go to this next slide. It's a very old line that wooden poles that are basically degrading, and we need to replace it. And rather than just replace what we had built back in the 60s or 1958 when it was built, we are looking to right size it for the needs that we have now and into the future. Because essentially we want to make a no regrets investment when we are updating our lines. If we rebuilt it the same way that we did that it's standing now, in 10 or 20 years, we might need to go back and provide more upgrades to that because we didn't build large enough for what was coming. This is a really important project from the region. It's the first right sizing project that the region has approved, said it will pay for. And there's a lot of eyes on Vermont to see how this project, how it gets built and the end result. Essentially, we are taking a line, and it's a very critical line, an interconnection to Hydro-Quebec. So we can't take this line out of service. It needs to stay in place while we build a new line. So we're building a new line about 15 feet to the east, still keeping it in that 150-foot corridor that we have right now. We're not trying to expand our asset, we're just trying to optimize our asset. The new line will be a little bit taller, and rather than the two poles that you see with the X brace in the middle, it'll be a single steel monopole that has the phases on both sides. And this will essentially, once we get that new line built, we'll decommission and take down the old existing line. And the great thing about this project is now it has opened up the entire western corridor of our right of way. And that allows us to think innovatively and creatively about, could there be an additional line there that could help meet our needs that we will need over the next 20 years as we see electrification grow. That's something that Velco is actively pursuing. We can talk about this later, so it is in the slide. There is a project that's very much in its preliminary stages. We're calling it Alliance Transmission Project. And essentially it's a joint venture with transmission developers and Hydro-Quebec to bring 1,200 megawatts of additional power and have it be bi-directional. So rather than what we currently have, which is basically just bringing power in, we want to be able to send that power back. So there are times of year where Vermont's distributed energy resources are producing more energy than we need. Well, can we send that back to Canada to essentially energy bank that power? And when we do need it, when our loads are going up and we don't have enough in-state power, taking it back. This is bi-directional is really the new term for transmission development. We know this will be a solution for the local congestion that we're seeing in that northern area of Vermont. We know it's going to help reduce greenhouse gases for the region and help accommodate additional renewable generation in state. We see this as a win-win, but again, we're just starting out with this project. There'll be more to come as we advance with trying to make this happen.
Super, well, thank you so much. I have a couple of questions for you. So you talked about non-transmission solutions. Does Velco own some amount of storage, or do you sponsor distribution utilities to own storage?
So we do not own storage. It's not quite allowed in the mechanism now, although there could be changes that are coming through ISO New England that would make that a smart decision for us.
So that's an ISO constraint. Could you repeat that?
Sorry, so that requirement, that's an ISO requirement, that you not have storage?
We're looking at storage as a transmission only asset where that makes sense for us, because we are essentially a delivery system,
right.
and have never put storage on our system. When the region makes rules that make it feasible and affordable, we will certainly start looking at that as an opportunity.
Oh, that's okay. When the region makes it so that it's
Correct.
I have more questions about it, but I'll save it for another time.
But in the meantime, the distribution utilities certainly are taking advantage of that technology. And we actually, through our Green Mountain Power is Velco's utility in Rutland, we have put a battery on our facility property to be able to reduce just the energy load that we have right at our Pinnacle Ridge facility.
Yes, the Franklin County project, is that being funded through federal funds? How is that being paid for?
Regional.
It's through ISO fund, it's like the cost sharing ISO.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
are you getting any of the federal infrastructure funding?
We tried really, really hard. We submitted several applications for the Grid Resilience and Innovation Program to GRIP federal grants. Unfortunately, we did not receive any awards from that. But the good news is many of our customer owners did receive federal funding for their projects. So we continue to we'll see what type of opportunities arise.
The transmission utilities receive some, the
Distribution
utilities.
Correct.
Receive some, like you did.
Correct.
Interesting, okay.
There is an RFP that's happening throughout the region. ISO New England's region, it's a long-term transition planning effort to basically understand, here's what we need for 2050. what transmission do we need to help make that happen, to enable that transition. And so it's a little bit like the railroad wars, where there's a lot of transmission companies putting proposals forward through an RFP process that will be issued in March and likely selected by the end of the year. And hopefully there will be more RFPs that come out as part of that planning process. It's a big deal for New England because there was never a time where all 6 New England states would get on board and say yes to funding these projects. And we finally have a way where people see the need and see the benefit, and the states are at the table to make this happen.
So Senator Williams has a question, and then we're gonna have to.
Or I'll make
Go ahead. No,
And
it's-
this may be something for another presentation, but hear a lot about grid security, being able, people being able to hack into the system. Is that a concern for Velco? And if so, what are we doing to try to shield what you guys do?
Cybersecurity is definitely a big deal in the transmission operator world. I think you asked our CEO or our IT manager, what keeps you up at night? That would probably be top of the list. That being said, we have a very robust IT team that has implemented very stringent measures and cybersecurity firewalls. And a lot of it actually comes down to just training employees that we're kind of the weakest link. If we click on a link that is, said by a bad actor, but it's masked by being from someone friendly or someone you can essentially put our system at risk. And so the amount of training and conversation that happens just internally is really important. And they do a really great job of keeping everybody in the know of the latest and greatest scams. But yeah, cybersecurity is certainly something that we are on top of and keeping a close eye on.
Super, thank you. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the detail, and thank you for
Absolutely.
this.
If you have any questions, my contact information is in that. Feel free to reach out. If you're ever in Rutland and want a patrol center tour, happy to provide that. So thank you.
That could be a all the things. It's so many. Thank you so much. And I also just want to thank the committee for hanging in there with some very different kinds of topics today. So I'm going to welcome the chamber up. I know it is all important. So we have Jeremy Little from Raw Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning.
Yes, so one possibility, I know I've just invited you up here. Do you need a break now, team? Would you like a break, or should we do one more and then take a break? What's your?
We are gonna be in Senate Economic at 10:45, so I will be super fast.
Okay, yes, we'll do it.
We'll be real quick. Okay, actually probably will not share. We're just gonna skip that. I don't know how to actually exit. I should get a refresher on Zoom. Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce.
Jeremy Little, Policy and Outreach Associate for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce.
So I really appreciate the opportunity, Madam Chair, to come in today. I know I got some questions from folks like, I saw you on the Senate Natural, like what are you guys doing in there? Just wanted the opportunity to come in because we'll probably be in the room listening to what's going on and trying to be part of the conversation to move things forward in a positive way. So I thought it'd be good to come in and just introduce who we are, who our members are, who you're gonna be, seeing in the room, and answer any questions. I won't go too in depth because we have a short amount of time, but do have sort of our outline on your site. If you're, really excited and interested in that, you can do that. So the Vermont Chamber's mission in 4 words is to advance the Vermont economy. That's sort of what we come in our advocacy work through the lens of, what are we doing to advance the Vermont economy for all Vermonters and hopefully for a lot of future Vermonters who can come and be a part of this great state. Another part of our organization is the Vermont Futures Project. They are sort of a separate foundation entity that does research, looks at data, thinks about the future of Vermont. We're focused on sort of today and what we need to be doing. They are really thinking about the future. Kevin Chu heads up that effort. He is working on an economic action plan for the state, so maybe worth him coming in once that's finalized in a couple weeks, but he's fantastic. If anyone's an opportunity to meet Kevin, he's great. So the Vermont Chamber is the largest statewide business organization in Vermont, and our membership is sort of split into thirds. 1/3 is tourism, hospitality type businesses, 1/3 is businesses in the manufacturing sector, and then the other 2/3 is what we call professional services, which is sort of a catch-all for all the other types of businesses that make a home in Vermont. When we're in here, we're probably thinking a lot about whether it's our tourism businesses who are engaged in outdoor recreation, really thinking about land use and how we're both conserving land for land use and making land available for recreational use. Those are a lot of the interests of some of those businesses. On the manufacturing side, manufacturing businesses employ just under 30,000 people in the state, and have a $2.9 billion impact on state revenue. So it's an important sector in the state. I think a lot of manufacturing is really hidden in Vermont. If you don't see it, we're going to try and bring some light to it. We do our tourism economy day every year, and this year we're also going to have a manufacturing day to try and really highlight some of the cool things that are happening in this state. But when we're thinking about things like energy use and water, we know that manufacturers have a role in that. And we were following closely with what the PUC was doing this summer. Talked about the Affordable Heat Act when it was going through prior to last year. And one thing that we want to bring to the table is ensuring that we're thinking about manufacturers in that conversation, commercial as well as industrial use, because the incentives and the products that work for residential aren't necessarily going to make Cabot and Abermarch Shatter happen in their pretty massive manufacturing facilities, or GE Aviation or Weidman. I think that there's some pretty amazing manufacturing happening that uses industrial processing fuels for that process. So what we want to do is just be able to talk about that of, when we're talking about what this could look like, the new regulation or how we move towards a greener future, keeping an understanding of what that means for our industrial and commercial users. We have one resort who told me they have 19 heating bills a month, right? Because of all of their different propane tanks that they need for each part of the resort. So it's really complicated really fast when we start talking commercial and industrial. So we did not see, unfortunately, a lot of that in the PUC's work this summer, that consideration of those parts of our economy. So we're just going to want to keep talking about what those types of businesses may need in terms of incentives as we're if we're increasing costs in order to create an incentive, what does that mean for them? So I'm also happy to help with field trips. Some of these manufacturing, that is one of my favorite parts of my job, is getting to do field trips to manufacturing facilities. Our advocacy work, we try to be really proactive, and I think, we spent a lot of time in this committee last year, as well as former representatives, now senators, committee in the House, really engaged on the Act 250 work. We were part of the stakeholder group that participated leading up to that. We stayed close with the coalition of organizations there. I'll be participating in the Tier 3 stakeholder group as well as the appeal stakeholder group. So we're going to continue to be really active in that. Happy to have conversations about how things are going in those processes as well as what's happening here. But land use, obviously is important. Housing is a massive challenge to our to our members who are trying to create jobs here, and just get back to people and often cite, the lack of availability of housing, and it's statewide. So as we can be part of those conversations, we'll want to continue to stay at the table for that. And we try and bring data to that as well. So we, use what we're learning from the Vermont Futures Project. And do that in what we call data informed rather than data driven. We're people driven and data informed. People come first but data can support those processes. Our team, Jeremy and I are here. Jeremy is new to the chamber, kind of. He was an intern with us 2 years ago and is going to be really focusing on manufacturing and issues around manufacturing. So he'll be here a lot on energy and environment, and also looking at healthcare and things that we're hearing about from our manufacturing members. I am sort of a catch-all in here all the time, and I'll continue working on land use and housing, economic development, fiscal policy. We have a new president of the chamber, Amy Spear, from Raleigh County, but she took over for Betsy Bishop when Betsy retired this summer. And she's going to continue working on tourism and hospitality, and also to do some fiscal policy. And then Karen Duguay with our team is going to be leading those industry days. So Tourism Economy Day and Manufacturing Day. And so when we have those, it'd be great for get some of those businesses maybe in here to talk about what they do as they're as relevant to your committee's work. Our priorities this year, not a shock. It's sort of similar to what a lot of people are talking about is, affordability. We're, from a lot of members who are really stressed about the cost of doing business as well as the ability to support their employees. And so we're really looking at like, what are some other root causes? We know demographics is a huge challenge. That we're hoping to, have good conversations and some of the other committees here about how do we really do some innovative things around our demographics? How do we get people to the state? How do we take something like the Global Warming Solutions Act and go to Texas and say, you value a green economy as part of our value system here, and we have incredible jobs at places like Core Power Solutions in Waterbury doing battery storage and Beta Technologies, or businesses that are on the cutting edge of the green economy. How can we do better at recruiting people from the state, sort of promoting the work that you all have done? So we'll be talking to other communities about that. Welcome the opportunity to talk to you all about it as well. Incremental progress towards aspirational goals. So, looking at things like the Clean Heat Standard or data privacy, how can we make progress towards our goals in a way that our economy can handle, that businesses can keep up with the changes that are being asked of them, understanding that I think a lot of people share the goals, it's just how we get there and the rate at which they can absorb change. So we'll be talking about that. And then, housing is the one that we continue to want to stay on top of. A lot of good work has happened in the last few years. I think there's opportunities to continue that work forward. Other areas that we can be looking at, and especially around infrastructure in our communities where we're asking them to build. I've been talking a lot. That's not abnormal for me. I'm gonna let Jeremy talk about some of the other folks that might be in here with us.
Yeah, so something near and dear to my heart, Megan mentioned I was an intern before being employed full-time here. And so now I get to run the internship program. So we have 8 amazing interns this year from St. Michael's College, UVM, and Middlebury. And so we'll have 2 in here each day, each difference. And so you'll likely see them kind of around taking notes, kind of observing. Depending on the day, you'll see different interns. But please feel free to go up to them in the hallways, come up to them at any point and say hello and introduce yourself, because they're all really great and they're really interested in the stuff that's happening here.
And we're hoping that they will all stay in Vermont and work after they graduate. So they're all policy oriented young Vermonters, and we'll try and keep them engaged.
Yeah, go ahead.
So kudos, you came to Cedar in Rutland.
Yeah.
They have a road show. Really got a lot of input from the community, from the legislators in Rutland District. And I applaud you for that.
Yeah, we try to get out, and that's, I think, an important thing, so we are the statewide chamber of commerce. You may have interacted with your local chambers as well, the difference there is, you know, I think we all share the same mission of advancing the Vermont economy, and our local chambers are really well positioned to do that in a way where they're doing, you know, great networking events and focused on sort of their local, how do we get people together and do, you know, match businesses up so they can collaborate and highlight what's going on in our community, bring people into our community. We are set up to be more of a statewide policy advocacy, also providing resources and doing education through things like our conferences. So we have our economic conference that's coming up later this month. That's an annual event. A manufacturing summit, a workforce summit, and some policy events that we do to try and bring sort of a statewide lens.
It was a good 30,000 foot view because people tend to just think about their own area and the problems that you
Yeah.
have there. And then you brought it, you know, this is what's going on across the state, which I think is, the continuity is important.
Thank you. That's what we're trying to do.
And one of the first things that I did when I joined the chamber was really start to set up tours at manufacturing facilities all around the state with like all sorts of different industries to really try to get a broad perspective on what's happening in the manufacturing sector throughout the states. So, if anybody ever wants me to help facilitate any tours, please let me know.
Super.
The last thing I'll mention is we do a newsletter every Friday, state to Maine. It goes to all of our members, and we also send it to all legislators. And so, you know, if there's something in there that you want to talk about, you know, find me in the building, send me an email. I'm always happy to have a conversation of whether it's something that we, you know, are reporting on that happened in another committee or question about something that we've got, just let me know. I'm happy to chat. That was super fast. I'm sorry. There's probably more, but just wanted to introduce ourselves. We want to have 2 interns in here every day. They'll be in the building, so they might be in here sometimes.
Great, super. Oh, and just wanted to also mention to the community, you are a great partner in you know, thinking through the housing bill last year. So the action fifty reform. So very, very grateful for collaborating on that. So yeah, any other questions from me? Yeah, go ahead.
Just thank you for doing the internship program, because I know one huge amount of that is a great thing for Vermont. So thanks.
Thanks. All right, anyone else? Okay, all right, well, thank you so much.
Very much.
Yeah, for sure. And we are gonna go on a break until 11, so we've got a little bit Okay, all right, so, we're back. This is still January 15th. Natural resources and energy, and we're coming off a break, so, with the committee discussion, I have a few questions, I have a few rounds of, questions, just so that, yeah, we can, get to know each other a little bit, and also, hopefully set ourselves up for some good, discussion in the future. Yeah, so we'll do a few questions, and then I want to, divide up, the appointments and, see who's up for, taking folks to interview. But just in terms of process for this group, you're thinking about us working together. I would love to just hear from everybody, and forgive the sort of hokey nature of these questions, but you know, what do you need from this group in terms of working well as a part of the group? Is there anything that we can do to help this group be functional for you? I'll give you a little time to think about it. Yeah, go ahead.
I will jump on the bandwagon. I think it helps me in everything. We start on time.
Yeah.
As you know, make a commitment to get here to start on time. That helps me, and I think that being probing, but yet succinct in our questioning and stuff, so we can get through. So everybody gets a chance to ask questions, and we get to hear a variety instead of just a domination of the Julie's time.
So making sure that everybody gets a chance to ask questions. Yep. It's fair. Other thoughts?
So what was the question? Is that?
Oh, what would be useful to you in terms of making sure that this is a functional group? Or, you know, just, you know, as we function together, what should we keep in mind to help you be a part of it, function well? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, also.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that I'd like to get kind of a 30,000 foot view of where we're going.
Mhm.
Your priorities, leadership priorities,
Mhm.
and even administration. And, you know, it's good we have an agenda, so we can do some studying the night before, but I kind of want to look a week down the road and be proactive. Making sure we got the people that we need to testify here. I think we got a good group, you know, with so many people and. So what happened, but that's about it.
So being able to see the long term, where we headed, yeah.
I mean, it's a new biennium and, you know, everything has changed, including the numbers on the bills.
Yeah.
Some of the bills that we had in the last 2 years were from that.
This is true. Yeah, fair. Thanks.
Do we know which ones they are?
Not yet. That's nothing on our board so far, yeah.
It is a huge area of jurisdiction that we have. So I think taking the time that feels like we're beginning to take to really explore and get grounded in all of the players and moving pieces is, you know, the right approach. So I think, you know, not just immediately diving into bills per se and really spending time and getting us all oriented and reviewing, and a lot of us, some of us have been here, but is a worthwhile to do.
Well, it's a pretty new area for me, so and just in general, I like to ask a lot of questions. Well, you should, So I like to have the time to ask questions and to have witnesses be prepared to answer my questions. So making sure anybody who's listening out there, no, better be prepared. That's helpful to me. I agree with your comment about it's a broad area. I'm new to a lot of it, so just taking the time to sort of get the landscape. I also kind of wanna have some fun, so that's why I'm like, let's do field trips. Let's, you know, I think that though anything we can do to like bond as a group of 5 of us would be helpful, like have some bills that we can all agree on and feel like we're winning, you know, as a team. And then I think we'll make it when we disagree easier if we know each other well. This is super nerdy, but I'm gonna say it anyway. My family's a big board game family and we play a lot of board games and have like a spreadsheet, how nerdy we are. Yeah. Anyway, there's some really good board games in this area that we play. So if any of you are interested in playing, even as a committee, maybe we could do that at some point. Cause I think they're actually really illustrative of some of the problems we're trying to solve and it might be not fun.
What are some of the names, if you wouldn't mind?
We just got this new game for the holidays called Daybreak.
Okay.
And it's really cool and it's like basically this game, it's a cooperative game, so we could each play a different part of the world. And you try to quote unquote solve the climate change crisis. And there are all these cards you play that do different things, and I think they're kind of interesting because some of them are cards that some of us might like to think about it more, you know, cards we might play as Democrats or cards we might play as Republicans, but we're all trying to play the game together and solve the crisis together. So we all have to play each other's cards kind of thing. It's really fascinating. And
Daybreak.
called Daybreak. Yeah, I don't know if your store plays, sells games, but there are others. A good friend of mine is a game designer and she's designed some really cool games. So anyway, maybe that's a little weird, but that's kind of like trying to think out some of the problems. Oh, no fun.
That's great. That'd be really fun. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm thinking back to a previous committee I was on the morning, we used to have an agenda posted, when we came in, because of somebody couldn't make it or whatever. This is nothing to you, on you, but I keep you in it. And a lot of times, you know, we really didn't know who we were talking to. So as I see a lot of new people, a lot of new faces in here, there's some way that we can actually, because some of them represent different areas of our committee. We can just find out what they're doing here and what, you know, what interests they're. I know it's important to me to have that, but I know it's difficult to get the information. People could just introduce themselves in their room.
Yes, yeah, Sharon, you wanna?
Yeah, just one thing on the agenda, the best way to see the most current agenda is to go to the website.
Yep.
Because
I'm on it.
as you can see, it'll change. I
Right.
mean, it can
Yeah.
change. If someone can't make it, even though they were scheduled, they'll let me know and then I'll take it off. So I would highly recommend looking at the website in the morning.
Yep, I look
to
at
get
it
what's gonna happen.
occasionally because I wanna make sure I do my homework.
No, it's ridiculous to print
Right.
5 copies every day.
No,
And then
wrong.
change, right? Yeah, well, and we're gonna be doing our planning for the coming week. So we should have it posted for the next week, at least. Yeah, so the initial agenda will be posted by Friday.
Yeah.
you know, weather and people's health affect whether they can show or not, things are gonna change, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Is this a time to talk about sort of what we would like to see the committee do over the course of the?
Can we pause before, is that okay, or if you wanna get to that? Oh, it's okay. Well, and just, you know, for myself, I also do like to ask a lot of questions. I also just wanna make sure that everybody knows that, I don't ever want anybody to feel like a question is too elementary or too basic to ask, like all of those fundamental kinds of questions are, I think, welcome. Even though I was on this committee last year, like I would still need to be asking some of those sometimes. And you know that if you have that question, there are probably at least 5 people watching that also have that question. And it's just something for me, that I that would be helpful is I actually appreciate feedback. So, if maybe not while we're on the air, but if things are going if you'd like to see things going a different way somehow, I want to know that. So I want to be responsive to all of you. And then yeah, so far so good. Psyched that you're all here. So and then one sort of follow-up but related question to that is thinking about times when we do get to conversations where we're going to disagree about things. I mean, it's inevitable, right? Like it's going to happen. How do you like to either disagree with people, or what makes disagreement healthy for you? Does that make sense? Like what can we do to make disagreements either feel good or as good as they can? Sometimes there's no way to make disagreements actually feel good, but if we can make those disagreements feel as good as they can, what can we do to for each other to help make things go well?
I think just as long as everybody got heard.
Yeah.
Then it's fine.
Senator Harvey, and I know what it is to go through that, but 3 words I all thought about was when you have your organization, first you form, then you storm,
Mm-hmm.
then you have a norm, who figured it?
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? So
Just be respectful.
Yeah.
It's totally okay. Let's see it second.
yeah, fair enough. Yeah. I know for myself, sometimes if I am feeling really I'm not trying to say it, like highly emotional about something, or if there's a lot of stress that's built up behind the disagreement, sometimes I like to just take a break. Do you know what I mean? Where I need to like diffuse a little bit of just like come down from this, a place of being keyed up potentially. So because I feel like my best decisions are made when I am like just feeling calm or level or logical. And so
Where's your gavel?
we don't have them in here. But we had gavels when I was a mayor.
Oh, yeah.
I never used it,
Sure.
even though it was there. It's not my system.
I don't have.
She wants to die.
I would use it. You need a gavel. We can arrange that.
We'll get it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, just so you know, anything you wanna share, no, that's okay. Yeah, okay, that's great. Okay, and yes, yeah, sure.
Just on the break, it really, last year, I'm not suggesting do this by the way,
Mhm.
but we always broke at 10 of the hour. And I'm not suggesting do that because that's a lot, and we were close to the cafeteria and everything. So, but,
It's too far.
so, yeah, it's too far. So, once we kind of knew when we're gonna do it on a daily basis, that would be, because we're here for 3 hours.
Sure.
And knowing that we're gonna break it 10:30 or whatever it is.
Yes.
Even if you just announce it at the beginning.
Yeah, okay,
But somewhere in that, always knowing it,
that's fair.
we're gonna do it once, it's a good thing. You know.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a great idea. So if we can if we start at 9, if we're breaking at 10:30, just as so that we all have that as an expectation, I think that's great. But I appreciate your flexibility today, sticking through since, Arvin says I don't have occasions.
It's okay.
Fair enough. Okay, and so, moving into a different question here, just thinking about, separate from the bills or the topics that we want to bring, to this space. And again, in the spirit of getting to know each other, what are some of the values that, that you care about, like, that you're bringing to the table here, that are gonna help shape how you approach the topics that we're discussing. And I realize you probably were talking about them a lot in your campaign to be here, and maybe some of them apply to this jurisdiction, if they don't. But yeah, I would love to hear what are your values? Do you want a couple minutes to think about it, or maybe you're ready? Whatever, yeah, sure.
So I'm very conservative, fiscally, and I basically, I consider myself a conservationist, so I like to, I own forest land that I maintain with my family, and, I'm concerned about clean water like everybody else. And, but there are a lot of things that I don't know. And I look at this as an opportunity to kind of broaden my horizons and my knowledge, so that I can make informed decisions when people ask me a question. Because I'm not here for myself, I've done that. I've been there and done that. I'm really here because the people in the state, we have a big part here. Not that it doesn't go in my head, but I think, I want to do the right thing by my constituents. I'm not always going to do that. Sometimes I get maybe too bold and to come to the point. I don't want to offend anybody, but I will. And I just want everybody.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think work needs to be data driven. I think that solutions need to be realistic. And I think that win-lose solutions are often failures from the get-go. And so I think that do the hard work to get to win-win positions.
Yeah. Very much.
I value honesty and fairness. And, I really appreciated serving with Senator Williams. Actually, the two of us don't always agree, but we are always very honest with each other. And also, I think we sometimes surprise each other because we do agree. And so I think that's a good lesson, is that I think we might all agree more than we think we do. And so not going into it thinking we're gonna disagree. We might disagree on how to get to the thing, but not on the thing. That makes sense. I'm also, and you are too, but a mom, and I think really a lot about like how the work that we do in this room and in this building impacts our kids and the next generation of Vermonters. I have 3 very vocal and passionate children, and they are particularly vocal and passionate about some of the issues that we're talking about in here. And so they are the first to lobby me. And I think it's really important that we listen to young Vermonters and what they're saying about their future. They're going to be here longer.
Mike, following up on that, actually, one level. My guess is we all have the same underlying values. In so far as we care about our constituents, care about the people of Vermont, care about Vermont, we're trying to do the right thing. I think I think that's underneath there, and I would guess all 5 of us. So I think just like somebody else says, kind of how you get the disagreement, how you get there. I'm an environmentalist and make those connections, but I also want my friends to have jobs. And so it's ultimately, I think of myself as my approach is being practical, but, you know, big picture, but try to be practical and, you know, sometimes you can't do it in a totally data-driven way. There's often a little bit of a leap of faith involved in trying to make things happen in a big picture way, but I also don't disagree with that. But Scott said, so I was trying to the best job we can, but I think it helps be practical in an approach, but also willing to be visionary, have a vision and try to get the vision. So.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah, and for myself, gosh, I agree with so much of what has been said. You know, I guess my values here is I want to do right by my community, you know, the constituency that elected me, and that, you know, thinking about the well-being of that community, that includes the natural community as well. You know, like how are we taking care of the biodiversity around us, because I see these things as interconnected, and you know what we do to one aspect of the you know of that natural community does come around to affect us. Certainly very concerned about future of Vermont, and really I want to be building towards a Vermont that can feed itself, that can heat itself, that you know has the capacity to meet its own needs and to thrive and not be running itself into the ground financially or you know from an environmental perspective. And I think you know taking the long view of health in all, you know, socially, economically, and environmentally, I think is what I want to keep in mind, you know, as to where we're going, where we're and I appreciate that, you know, we probably all want to get there. It's just what's the best method to get there, and what's the rate of change that the system can absorb to get there. And I appreciated that that comment earlier today, thinking about the rate of change. So thank you, everybody, for sharing. We are gonna hold off on the conversation about the bills or the topics that we tackle, but let's do that next time. I do want to try to give you well, when I say next time, I guess what I mean is the next time that we have a bit of space to do that. So we'll look at the calendar to see, because it's not going to be tomorrow. And just to
Can I ask a
yes,
question?
sure.
One thing I just heard as we were all talking, how do you want us to refer to each other? Should we use our first names, our titles? What do you want us to call you? Every committee is a little different, and I think we should all be on the same page so that there's not any kind of slighting of each other.
That is a great question. Do you all have opinions about this?
Sure.
Yeah. I guess I'm open to whatever.
Both of my committees last year used titles and were more formal. Yeah, but I can go either way. I just think we should all be on the same page so that it doesn't feel like some of us are doing it one way and some of us, because it can be a little power differential.
It's a good question. Do you have, looks like you have an opinion?
No, I really don't. I'm thinking about it. I tend to, on a personal level, I tend to be informal and just, but on the other hand, the quorum does matter. I've learned that the quorum, so maybe it is better if we refer to each other as opposed to Scott, so that can Madam Chair, and
I think it's got to be valid, especially when somebody's in the chair, in the witness chair.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're gonna refer to us as senator, and I think it might be, we make us more equal to all
Do the same.
do the same so that.
Yeah.
Obviously, in more informal.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
You asked that.
Yeah, So perhaps while we're around this table, we'll just be a little more formal and refer to each other as Senator Williams, we have on guard, so and but certainly if we are not around this table, please feel free to call me Ann. Yes,
So I'll tend to. I believe in the Constitution, right, and I believe that a lot of issues, if we can just keep that as a grounding document, that we can keep things focused. And there's a process, and we need to stick to it. Constitution means the founding document, so if you can go back to that, and not spin off into the ozone layer, I think that's a good thing. The ozone layer's what?
that's true, making me come back.
Right, yes.
Great, okay, and just to give a heads up about tomorrow, I mean, I'll say this to everybody there as well as we get started, because we have a joint hearing tomorrow and it's gonna be over in the pavilion building to we're gonna do two things, maybe you've seen the agenda already, but just in case, legislative council is gonna walk us through Act 18, also known as the Affordable Heat Act, Clean Heat Standard, and just lay out what was in it, what the charge was, and then we're gonna receive from the chair of the Public Utility Commission some overview of what's in the report that is due today. And our job in that space is just to listen and ask questions and understand. It's not gonna be a time to opine about it or to share, this is the direction I think we should go. We're not gonna be taking a vote on it. It's just to hear. There will be a time to opine on it and to talk about the direction. It will not be tomorrow. Just so you know what the expectations are there, and also just I'll just say right now, to be grateful for all the incredible amount of work that went into creating that document. So just to frame that up a little bit. Okay, the last thing that we have to do today before we break is pick folks to interview, and you're all familiar with this process, or
I'm not sure how.
okay, yeah, so anytime the governor makes appointments, they have to be confirmed by the Senate, and as okay, yeah, right. And as you probably heard, the one that was made the news last year was the Secretary of Education. They are not normally controversial like that, but it is incumbent on us to interview these folks, to understand their backgrounds, what qualifies them for this job, and then come back with a recommendation as to whether or not we should confirm them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I saw they were all in the journal yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, pile of them.
Yeah, yes.
Put it out on the Senate as well.
Okay.
Well, so just to clarify.
Yes, please, yeah.
Yeah. So some of the appointments will be reported on the Senate floor with a full report. And those are usually secretaries and commissioners or major board members. So like in this area, the PUC members would be things like that. But the regular boards and lower level people are voted on as a group. So we wouldn't do individual reports for them, but I would definitely encourage you to take it seriously, try to actually have an individual conversation with the person. Ask them if they want to serve, because not everybody who gets reappointed wants to. They may have been reappointed and not really maybe known it. And also sometimes literally one of the people who was on my list one year was dead. So like there are sometimes mixed ups, let's just say. So don't assume that this person is eager to be on the board of whatever it is. I don't know what they all are in this area, but and do due diligence, because then our names are next to, that Senator Williams has said, this person seems good for this board, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So are any of them delinquent as far as being appointed? Because I actually had somebody that I was responsible for the health and welfare committee that I called and said, hey, you're gonna be, you've been recommended to be on the board, so I already, it was, but it was 2 months late. And he or she thought that they were already on it, and they in fact.
So these people, I think it's fair to say, actually, do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, so a lot of people, the governor often makes appointments right after the legislature has adjourned. And then those people will start serving while we're out of session. It is, the statute is a little vague, maybe we'll see clarification to that. And so that they may have already served for 6 months or even more. Sometimes there's been a gap. So they might be confused as to why you're talking about it and be like, well, I'm on this board already. Yeah, so explaining the process to them is helpful.
Yeah, and so they're almost all, like, these people are all serving already.
Generally speaking, yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes there's an exception, but.
So I did pick out a couple, sometimes it's nice to be interviewing people that are from your region, and so there's one person from Lyndonville. So I don't know if it's close, it's not exactly, but, and then this person's from Pulteney. So I'm gonna pass them to you, and besides that, it's like, so I'm gonna, and you have, Janet already. So otherwise, I'm just gonna pass these around, see if, like, you can look through them and see if there's any.
How many each do you want us to do?
I think you have.
That is a good question. I did not count them before I just distributed them, but I think if we have something like 2 or 3 each, that should be good.
I've got, you already have.
I have a couple. There's one fellow that I know and one from Barry.
Janet.
I don't know. Is Janet in that list? Yours is.
Yeah, right?
That was for me.
Okay,
Oh,
so, and in the past, I said, if you want me manager, I can do a spreadsheet. And keep track of who this, and we occasionally can bring it up. As far as who's on the list of them confirmed or.
we can. I mean, do you keep such a spreadsheet as well?
I don't have a spreadsheet, but I will. And when you've spoken to them, then I can tell you, you can put them on the agenda
Sure.
to say yes or no.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Is there somebody that, phone number,
That's always been a bugaboo though.
Is the phone number?
Yeah, sometimes,
figured out.
Say
yeah,
all.
sometimes the office of the governor who
Mhm.
invites
Oh,
people doesn't always want to give out the phone number, so it can be tricky, but for the most part, you'll be able to find those people. If you can't, let me know.
Usually the governor's office will give contact him.
It depends.
It depends, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but we could ask.
I could ask,
We can.
yeah, go through me just so they don't get 20 people saying,
Okay.
and I'll ask her or whoever it is in charge
Okay.
to get you the information.
So I have 2, got more?
None of these people are in my area, but are there any in Addison County?
I didn't
Or
see anybody
Addison.
in Addison.
All right, well then,
Denise, for St. Albans.
I have this
Mention
one,
St. Albans. Do you have two? You two,
woman,
Okay, this means.
and then you have two.
Different. Okay, I have a variety.
Oh.
How many
could have been
You have two?
I have 3.
Okay, I have three.
I'm good with these 2 unless there's some that do these 3. Okay. All right, do you wish to list who's doing, who's following up with?
Well, yeah, that would be good because people forget. So yes.
So maybe we'll just pass around a sticky
Yeah,
and say,
right.
who are names.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you, here, do you want to, okay, sure.
Oh, you.
To give,
For the
to give,
sticky part.
to you, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And put your name on it. As well, I'm sure I got a bunch of.
Okay, so that's who I'll
Perfect.
follow up with.
And just one, I have copies of the bill for tomorrow, okay, invite.
Oh, sure, yeah, I think if, so while you're writing down names, Jude has copies of what became Act 18. So if you want a hard copy to look over tonight ahead of tomorrow's joint hearing, that is available. Okay. Would anybody like a hard copy?
I'll listen.
Okay.
Expectation for when these are to be completed no later than now.
That's a good question. We don't have a hard deadline. Can I get back to you about
Sure.
that? Okay. I would hate to. Look, yeah, let me think about the flow and when. I hate to just be making something up right now.
Pros and cons.
Yeah. Okay. Yes,
These are all May 2024, so.
yeah,
One thing we might want to think about along the lines of what we want is to have somebody from the budget council come in and give us an overview back on one.
oh, 181.
Such as we're setting up for interviewing people for the blurb on.
Mm-hmm,
So we
mhm.
have credit.
Yeah.
What it actually does.
That would be good.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that's interesting, thinking about, can I see that list there for a second? Because generally speaking, the people that we're talking to are on the Citizens Advisory Committee on Lake Champlain, Fish and Wildlife Board, and then the Land Use Review Board. And that's it. So if we had some introduction to the Fish and Wildlife Board, the Land Use Review Board, the Lake Champlain Citizens Advisory Committee, that could be good for context. Well, we'll think about that, so you know what sort of charge these folks are working towards. Okay. I think that is it for the day. Yes, question.
Well,
Yes.
I just wanted to, this young man over here in the corner is an insurance working for Senate Republicans, Alexander McMurray. He's a junior from UVM. Oh, senior, sorry, senior.
Great, wonderful. Great to have you.
Probably your son from where?
Oh, I apologize, what was the question?
From where do you live?
Oh, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
Great.
So you live in Georgia, you come to UVM? Yeah. All right.
Yes, I think I'm over here.
Yeah, good.
Great.
Can we get you a staker?
Maybe.
Okay.
Well, yeah, okay.
Because we have to offer you a boiler.
It's okay.
You're not away, but just don't mind if I follow over you. Excuse me in advance.
Send a quick back.
So it's okay.
Wait, is this the one? This is as passed by.
This is last year.
This is as fun.
That's passed. That's passed by the Senate.
Okay.
Do you have a copy?
Sure, I'll take a copy. Great, thank you. All right, so I think, unless